And good afternoon. Welcome everyone to our Facebook Live series with Skull USA. Today is May 3rd, and this would be our May edition of the series. With us today is a past president, Singh of Skull International and Skull USA. Hi, Mock. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Morgan. Pleasure to be here.
Well, we're delighted to have you with us, and thank you everyone for tuning in on Facebook. We appreciate you tuning in to listen to the questions that we're going to ask Mock. But if you have questions of your own, please feel free to type those in the comment box. You do have to allow the permission, so if you see pop up, please allow that so that we know who's asking the question, and we can get that over to Mock to ask that to him today. So to kick us off, Mock, just tell us about you. Love to hear more. I know you just traveled overseas, so if you want to tell us a little bit about your experience, but tell us about your career in the industry, where you got started, and particularly for those members of Skull USA that may not know a lot of the history of Skull and just about you in general.
Thank you very much, Morgan. I'm glad you have as much time as I'm going to take over this. No, just kidding. I got started in the industry right out of college. I had finished my bachelor's degree, and after that, I did a 2-year introductory program in travel administration and management, which was a very new program at the time. And that launched me into the industry. I worked for a small company in Columbia, Missouri, of all places, to begin with. And then I moved on to Kansas City, Missouri, which is where I got a lot of retail travel agency experience. After that, I was picked up by a company based out of Chicago, which appointed me sales manager for the Western United States, based in Los Angeles. And my primary job was to interact with the airlines and to come up with creative ideas in terms of how to generate sales for the various contracts that the company had signed with the airlines. A lot of them were based on minimum production levels. So I cut my teeth on trying to build volume and sales for the airlines early on. Subsequently, I was posted for a couple of years with the company overseas in India, of all places, luckily, where I was handling inbound tourists, primarily from the United States. So I learned a lot about DMC handling and how things work on the ground in terms of delivering a high quality tourism product for very affluent and well-heeled and well-educated travelers. I was posted back to Chicago with the same company. I was there as VP sales and marketing for a few years, and then launched out in business on my own. When I started on my own, I was lucky. It was a very interesting time. This is shortly after President Carter entered the White House, and the airline industry was being deregulated. So I was part of that, and I saw some opportunities where there were a large number of airlines that were relatively small, and they were foreign airlines. The US was the largest single travel market in the world, but they didn't have access to it because they couldn't afford to set up a presence in the United States. So that's what I began to offer, is kind of like a multi-line rep, if you like, but focused on the airline industry. And what I began to specialize in is setting up interline agreements between US carriers and these foreign companies so we could deliver and exchange passengers and cargo at various points in Europe and the Pacific region. So that's what I did for most of my life. And it's been 40 plus years in the industry. It's done very well for me. Unfortunately, with the start of COVID, everything just basically came to a halt. So for the last year and a half, we've been operating without any revenue. And that has really eaten up into our retained earnings over the years. And we're all, I think, hoping to see the other side of this terrible pandemic, where we can begin to rebuild our businesses and our lives. So that was a long version of it.
That was a fantastic overview and a lot of good insight to your knowledge of the industry, particularly on the airline side. So I guess how have, I mean, when you're talking about coming out of the pandemic, we've heard the news of well, I think it's like 90 plus countries that are going to be opening here shortly. Are you seeing some of that positive energy coming forward with those announcements?
I'm very excited about what is happening right now. I wish it had happened earlier. My company is also an active member of the USTOA, United States Tour Operators Association, and I'm afraid I was a bit vocal at some of those um, meetings of the board of USTOA, where I was pushing for our representatives on the Hill, a company called Elevate that USTOA hires. I was trying to get them to get early information into the Biden administration to number one, standardize and digitize the um, availability of vaccines and to be able to form a health record of what people have done in the way of testing, in the way of vaccines, and so forth. I remember a time, and some folks that are as old as I am might also remember it. There used to be a little orange card issued by the WHO, which recorded all of your health information in terms of what you'd been vaccinated against and so forth. And in order to undertake international travel in those days, you had to have one of those cards because if you were going to a country in Africa, they wanted to know you've been inoculated against malaria and so forth. So I don't view this as being anything different. And I was really hoping that we would have this digitized health information pass, if you like, formulated by now, but we're finally getting to it. It hasn't happened yet. And the second thing that I was very keen on is the United States has always taken the lead on these types of things, and I was hoping that they would initiate something where other countries would begin to come into the same room and everybody talk about what it constitutes for safe travel, what is needed for safe travel. I see that the EU has said last week that vaccinated travelers will be permitted to enter the EU in the future with no quarantine and no requirement for a negative PCR test. And our own CDC declared, I think about 3 weeks ago, that Americans who are vaccinated will be permitted entry into the country without a negative PCR test and without quarantine. These are great steps in the right direction. We need to get everybody on the same page on this, and I think we will begin to see travel and tourism reemerge. I know for a fact that people are chomping at the bit. They want to travel. They want to get back to some semblance of normality and restore their sense of humanity and dignity, which unfortunately has suffered a great deal over this last year and a half. So I'm enthusiastic. I'm looking forward to uh, uh, the changes that are coming, and I'm optimistic about what will happen in the second half of the year.
No, and thank you for being at the forefront and having your input heard and being in front of those issues. That's very important. So thank you for doing that and being so involved. Let's jump over to talking about SCAL and all of the involvement that you've had within SCAL International and SCAL USA. So, how did you get involved with SCAL, and how did the organization make an impact on you and your business? And I know you've held a variety of roles. So, what made you put your foot forward?
Very good question. Way back when I was first getting started in the industry, there was a gentleman here in Los Angeles who was Western Regional Manager for Japan Airlines. His name was Carl Buscemi. Carl and I got to be friends, and he told me about this secret society that nobody knows about. And he would invite me to a meeting of the secret society. So he did. And I loved it because everybody in the room was someone I could learn from, someone I wanted to interact with, somebody I wanted to make friends with. And it was great. And I said to Carl, I said, how do I get into this secret club? And in those days, membership was very restrictive. In Los Angeles, I think we had a limit of 70 members or 75 members, and it was all taken. And there was a wait list. The wait list was sometimes longer than the membership list. So I wasn't able to join in Los Angeles, but 2 or 3 years later, I was posted overseas. I was in India, and I was able to join Skoll International in the Delhi chapter in 1980. And once I became involved, it was something I really looked forward to every month to the meetings, because not only did I learn about the business, about my profession, but I learned it from the people who were actually at the top of the industry, and the people that could really help you with finding solutions to problems that you had, because they'd solved those problems multiple times before. And besides that, there was the social element. It was wonderful to be able to have a glass of wine with these people, and to be able to unwind, and be able to talk to them one on one, which was not something that would normally be available to someone junior like me in the industry at the time. And so that's how I basically got started. And as I progressed, as time went on, I learned that my colleague friends were not only there to be a wonderful social and friendship support, but I learned from them professionally. And then I began to understand that there is a lot of business opportunity among Skoll friends, which I began to harness and which did very well for me in later life. So, what really encouraged me to run for office in Los Angeles, and then later on for SUSA, and after that for Skoll International, was my desire to introduce colleagues to the ideas of using this organization, of becoming involved with this organization to help them at every level of their lives, the personal, the professional, and the business. And it was really a desire to get more people to see and get out of Skoll what I had gotten out, and to have them uh, benefit in the same way that I had benefited. So that is why I ran for office.
Well, that is amazing, and I know that so many people have benefited from you in this in your service and time within Skull. And the comments that are coming through, it's everyone saying how wonderful it is to see you, and that how wonderful you are, and humble and generous, as well as it's great to hear and see you. And they have so much respect and admiration for you and your work. So, all I can continue to say is thank you so much for everything that you have done for the organization, but also for the industry as well, because you have do so much outside of Skull too. So while you were in these positions, what were some of the key initiatives that you took on, and what are you most proud of from your time serving?
Thank you for all those wonderful comments, Morgan. I really appreciate it. And thank you to all of you who are listening and are making those comments. I truly appreciate it. Um, Starting out with my time as president of Skoll Los Angeles, I doubled the number of members we could have. So that absorbed a lot of our wait list right away. I felt particularly happy about that, because prior to that, we seemed to have locked out a lot of good potential members that we would have benefited from, and they would have benefited from being part of the organization. So I was particularly proud of that. Shortly after that, I had the opportunity, while I was president of Skoll International Los Angeles, to host an international congress here in Los Angeles. And that was an amazing experience. I learned so much from these delegates that had come from around the world, and there were about 1,300 of them. We had our share of problems, which I won't go into, but it was a great Congress. I learned a lot, and I got to meet so many people on an international level. And from then on out, it was just developing those friendships, and doing other things that would benefit others and myself. And finally, when I had the opportunity to be on the Skoll International Executive, I'm particularly proud of the fact that um, a few friends and I, all part of Skoll, we felt that the leadership of Skoll was not listening enough to the members in terms of what the members wanted. So we began to push for membership surveys. We conducted two membership surveys in 2011, I think, 10 and 11, I'm thinking. Maybe off by a year or two. But the results of these surveys were amazing. They told us exactly what the membership wanted. And then I became committed to ensuring that the will of the membership was met. So all my time on the executive I spent on that. And that was my biggest desire is and achievement, I think, because we made a lot of changes to the organization that were requested by the membership and that I was able to help put in place. Um, the active individual member status was one of those things, which is where we can have a member of Skoll without having a local club. And that helped us expand our reach quite a bit to begin with. And then while I was president of Skoll International, the international body, I had the distinct pleasure of introducing several programs, including the first one, which I'm very proud of, the International Institute of Peace through Tourism. We began to partner with them to see how Skoll could bring peace or bring people closer together in parts of the world that are afflicted by conflict. And one of those great achievements that Skoll made was um, to have the Red Sea Bay Club, which numbered as much as 50 members at one point, which was members from Egypt, Israel, and Jordan. And they would meet together every month. And these three countries have had lots of different problems and strife. But when the members got together, you could see that all of the strife falls away and people communicate with each other. And we were hoping that things of that nature would help build collaterals between countries that would supersede some of the negative uh, effects of government policies and things of that nature. I tried the same thing between India and Pakistan, who are traditional enemies, and I was able to, with the help of the International Institute of Peace through Tourism, begin a dialogue, which unfortunately fell away because of various political issues. But at least it was there, and we know that we can inculcate it and bring it together again. The other initiative I started in my year as Skoll International President was an agreement with Clean the World. This was an organization that was attempting to put together cleaning products, soap. Uh, and I was told at that time that 2 million people die because of lack of hygiene and inability to access cleaning products. Clean the World was attempting to take unused soap, the little bars of soap that you used to get in hotel rooms. So they were picking up those used uh, remnants of soap, uh, cleansing them in a process that they had developed, and reformulating that into fresh soap that was being given away in countries which couldn't afford, in communities that couldn't afford to buy soap. And I was really proud of both of those things, and the fact that I seem to have been able to get a lot of resonance from the Skoll membership on these programs and others that my executive committee and I introduced, with the result that we probably had one of the largest gatherings at the Skoll International Congress in many years. We had 1,180 people from 83 countries at the 2013 Skoll International Congress, which I was humbled to be able to preside over.
Wow, that's amazing. Those are great work, and those are two wonderful initiatives. Uh, and I'm receiving a comment that came in while you were talking about them, where The comment says, "You epitomize Skull. We've all learned so much from you."
Oh, wow. Thank you. Thank you very
Uh,
much.
James Enright from Skull, DC, but also formerly from Orange County, says, "I missed your wonderful Skull annual party at your lovely home in Los Angeles during my time on the West Coast, but does have a question.
Yes.
Um, LA has a highly successful pros club. How does Skull USA need to change to work/compete with them?"
Say again, Morgan. I'm sorry.
The question is LA has a highly successful pros club. How does Skull USA need to change to work/compete with them?
Uh, I would say, James, that we really shouldn't be thinking about competing with Prost. I think they are part of our industry. They appeal to perhaps a younger set, people that are just starting out in the industry. Skoll has always had this image of older, maturer, perhaps more highly placed people in the travel and tourism hierarchy. Um, and while I welcome, of course, younger people, a lot of us that are getting old really need to move over and allow young people, just like you, Morgan. I see what you're doing and very proud of it. And um, so I think uh, we shouldn't be thinking in terms of competition, but how we can change to attract more membership has been a perennial question, and we've expanded the membership categories quite a bit in order to be all inclusive and be able to bring in all aspects of the travel and tourism industry. And as you know, it continues to change. You've got things happening today, medical tourism, for example, which didn't exist 15 years ago. So we have to continue to be all inclusive, and we can, if we wish, invite people who are just entering the industry to become a part of Skoll. I think that will increase our appeal. But I would leave these decisions to the wiser heads of Sayusa and Skoll International at this point.
Yeah, it's definitely. I definitely agree. Where it's not necessarily a competitive thing. It's how can we work to bring more in our mission and where we are. Uh, so when we were talking about your path and your journey through Skull and also about your career, what advice do you have for anyone who's thinking about this path or even say that how you went about your career? What is any advice that you would share to someone?
Well, be yourself, and um, if you are truly moved by what you see in Skoll, what opportunities that Skoll makes available to you through the website, through the interactions, both at the local, the regional, the national, and of course the international level, if these things move you, then by all means get involved. Please get involved. Run for office. Make the changes that you think are going to make um, you and your friends and your members happy. And um, there could be no greater reward than uh, contributing to this amazing organization that we have built. And I would invite all of you to really look into what benefits Call can offer and take advantage of them. And if you feel that you've benefited, by all means, get involved with running the organization so that others can benefit like you have.
That is some great advice. So I'll, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to submit them. I'm going to ask Mock one more closing question and then we'll wrap it up. But please don't hold back if you'd like to ask him a question. So to close it out, Mock, I know you've touched on a variety of different experiences, and you've mentioned some here today, and James alluded to the skull parties at your home. If there was if you had to pick like one memory or maybe just a few memories that really kind of looking back on it are most memorable to you, what would be one or two of those?
I've had many amazing experiences, but one that stands out both for its challenge and for its uniqueness was um, I was vice president of Skoll International at the time, and my then president, Tony Boyle from Australia, told me that we had some Chinese delegates that were going to be attending the Congress in Turku, Finland, and that he was putting me in charge of looking after them and making sure that they were taken care of. Um, and they didn't speak any English. Well, one of them did. I think there were three of them, if I recall correctly. So I spent the next 3 or 4 days interacting with them, and they were very excited by what they saw. We were very excited about the opportunity to start Skoll in China. And at the end of it, they went back very enthused and saying, okay, we're going to launch a club in Beijing, and we want President Tony Boyle to come and inaugurate the club. And I said, that's wonderful, fantastic. I had lots of interactions with them. Fu Gao was the gentleman that I interacted with most. And then they set a date for the opening of the Beijing club. They submitted 60 or 65 membership applications. All of them were qualified. They were general managers of hotels, they were managers of airlines, they were people running DMCs, there were people involved with promoting tourism to China. So we were all very excited. And then, about 10 days before Tony Boyle was due to go to Beijing for this inauguration ceremony, at which, by the way, Communist Party bigwigs had been invited and all of that. So Fugao suddenly says to me, of course, you have to agree on the one China policy. So I said, clue me in, I don't know what's the one China policy. And he sent me a list of requirements that the Chinese government had for anyone wanting to do business in China having to adhere to the one China policy. The other stuff was all mundane, but there were two things that really stood out. One was that we could not use the Taiwanese flag at any of our ceremonies. Mm-hmm. And the second thing was that we could not call Taiwan a country. And they were listed in Skoll as a country. And when I saw this, I went right back to him and I said, if we are required to adhere to these policies, then I'm afraid Skoll is not going to participate with you and we're done. And he said, no, but all these people are coming and this inauguration has been set up. I said, I'm sorry, but we will not agree to these two policies. And I will see if I can work something out, but it's not going to happen. We're not going to accept these policies before this event happens in 10 days' time. So I called Tony Boyle and I said, Tony, you're not going to Beijing and this is why. And he said, yep, that's fine. We're not going. So I spent the next year trying to work out how to make these things work for both China and for Skoll, because Skoll was very keen to be in China and the Chinese really wanted to work with us. They offered that we could work sort of undercover without official recognition in China, and I turned that down. I was also looking after statutes at the time for Skoll International, and I said, we're not going to go undercover. It has to be either with full approval or we're not in China. So I spent the next year trying to figure out how to work these things. So one of them was that we introduced into the Skoll bylaws and constitution a small change which said that we would invite countries and territories to be part of Skoll International. So that was a way of, we didn't say Taiwan was a territory, we just introduced that language so the Chinese could interpret to mean whatever they wanted to interpret to mean. But we wanted to hold up our end with our wonderful Taiwanese colleagues. And the second thing with regard to the flag, I I had noticed that there was a new president in Taiwan, President Ma at the time, and he was very pro China. And for the first time ever, Taiwanese airlines had begun flying into Beijing, into China, with a modified flag on the tail of the aircraft. And I picked up on that and I asked the Taiwanese colleagues if they would agree to allowing us to use that flag instead of the traditional flag we had used for Taiwan at our annual flag parade and so forth. And after some difficulty and my insistence on a full vote of the Taiwanese colleagues, that was approved. So I went back to Fugao and said we can use this flag, which is used on the aircraft that are flying in from Taiwan, and they finally agreed. So we took one step forward, and the Beijing Club was established. And after that, I kind of lost track of what happened, but I know that we're in China at this point. So that was a very memorable, interesting problem I had to solve.
Yeah, and quite an accomplishment at the end. So that's a wonderful, I mean, it's a good outcome that was made, but definitely a story that is memorable in the different facets of everything that you had to do to get to the end.
Yes,
Um, we did have a question come in, so I'm gonna ask you this as a final question to close out.
sure.
Uh, Tom Moulton asked, out of all the engagements that are available to tourism NGOs, where do you think SI can make a difference in tourism promotion?
Um, I think Skoll International really can make a huge difference in the tourism world. And uh, we coined the phrase a trusted voice in travel and tourism. And we need to live up to that. We need to take positions on events that happen around the world that affect tourism, that affect travel, and that, of course, affect our members. And this interaction with the broader community, I think, is where Skoll International would be positioned to help countries realize their potential and, of course, companies and businesses participate in making that happen. Uh, some of what I had talked about earlier, the International Institute of Peace through Tourism, I didn't mention. Skoll is also a member of the UNWTO task force on the prevention of exploitation of children in tourism. So there are various aspects of the tourism diaspora and the tourism fabric worldwide that Skoll International has the ability to impact in a positive way. And that positive impact is going to flow through to helping NGOs, to helping countries, helping tourism ministers and the tourism departments of tourism of different countries to formulate policies that help promote tourism in their destinations without the exploitative and the negative impacts that sometimes come with over tourism or with the wrong kind of tourism. So I think Skoll International has a lot that they can do. And Tom, when you and I meet, we'll get into that, into a much longer discussion, I'm sure. There's a lot there to talk about.
Absolutely, there is, and there's so many different avenues you can go. So thank you all. Thank you for the questions today, Mock. Thank you so much for joining us. It was great to have your insights and hear more about you and where everything you've done and to hear the different paths that you've taken. Again, we all thank you so much for everything that you have done for us all. I think everyone, I said it in the comments that you definitely are you epitomize it all in so many ways. So thank you again so much for all of your service, everything that you have done and continue to do today, and everything that's going on in the world. So um, And if anyone has any additional questions, feel free. You can send them directly over to Mock. But have a great week, everyone, and we will see you next month.
Thank you
Thank you
very
again, Mock.
much, Morgan. And thank you all for listening. I love all of you guys, my friends at Skoll, and thanks for everything you've done for Skoll. And I really feel good today in having done this interview and reached out to all of you again. God bless. Stay safe.